wind is from the northwest today. Hi, my name is Kate LeBlanc, and I am a volunteer tour person at the British Heritage Village. And it is pretty well the doorway to Canada, the Gaspé, if you talk to a Gaspésian. What you're on right now, or what you're seeing right now, is the main part of the entrance. It's the Gendron store from Capeland, which is just down the road a piece. All of the wood and all of the shingles and part of the buildings that you're going to see on the site are all made from lumber mills in the area.
This area was the third, let's say, largest shipbuilding center on the Gaspé coast, right after Passeport-Biac and Mall Bay area.
The loyalist roots of many English Gaspésians inspired the creation of the Heritage Village, a permanent center for preserving and sharing this heritage.
Many years ago, this was all cleared land. There's people lived here and farmed all this. This grew up all by itself because nobody took care of it. So that's why we're here today trying to clean up some of the underbrushing, you know. And it's a big job. You're never done.
I like the brown house because it's representative of most of the families who settled in the area. And this particular house has a very interesting story from the builder. It was built around 1890, and he had 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys. And interestingly enough, his oldest son, Alvin, fought in World War I, survived, only to come back and be killed by the Spanish influenza. The architecture with the center window is quite an Irish thing. And it was for the women to look out of the fields or over the water to see if their husbands were coming home. The site itself is meant to represent mostly the Anglophone or the English-speaking community's contribution to Quebec, and a way of preserving that. A lot of these houses were built by Loyalist families. They're around the early 1800s, late 1800s that the styles of the houses are. And the families are still here in the area. So there's the continuity. My background is Acadian, but every now and then I kind of have to remember that these were very dour Presbyterians who built here. So when you see some of the costumes and some of the pictures and some of the layouts of the houses, you know it was very no-nonsense, very basic, let's get on with living, and no frills or anything like that. Whereas I know the Acadians loved their polka dots. They just loved wearing bright clothes and things like that.
We came here with a big machine, took all the bushes out, what we could, chipped it. Then we came back and we raked it off by hand. Then we took the tractor yesterday, harrowed all the ground. Now today we're putting oats here, like you see here, with hayseed. And 1 month from now, we will come back with the bush cutter or tractor lawnmower, whatever is suitable, and recut it for the summer to have a green look.
With the Cascapedia River, such a resource, that there was a lot of logging and raw lumber, sawed lumber was shipped directly to England for shipbuilding over there. And that was, they would build the ships here, fill them full of lumber, and sail them across the Atlantic and sell the ship and the lumber and the whole thing.
The Heritage Village is also home to a remarkable variety of antique farm implements and tools from the timber and shipbuilding trades.
Here are some of the instruments that would have been made by the blacksmith. He not only made houseware instruments for the wife, but he made a lot of the tools as designed by or demanded by the person, the farmer or the lumberman. So these are augers, these are drills that you can see handmade with a wooden handle on it. And that would have been used for drilling into the wood or whatever. And that could have been used to drill the holes for the wooden pegs.
As demand grew overseas for Gaspé fish and timber, so did the challenge of getting goods to market. Gaspé exporters, such as the fish merchant Charles Robin and the lumberman William Cuthbert, depended entirely on sea transport.
It was our major format of transportation at the time. You either arrived by boat, you left by boat, you got goods by boat, goods left by boat. And these tools in the center displays are all hand tools that would have been used by the carpenters or the shipbuilders who were imported from Scotland by Cuthbert to do a lot of the shipbuilding for his enterprises. So you'll see a lot of the tools are hand carved again. The blacksmith would have had a hand. There's a planer. There's little hand saws, things like that. So all of these things would have gone into making the wood for the shipbuilding enterprises.
The coopers that built the barrels to put a lot of the salmon in and things like that. Then there were the people who made the blocks for the ships, and there were a lot of blocks on these ships. And the rope makers and the sail makers and the blacksmiths. There were an awful lot of iron work on these ships, and the blacksmith had to make all these pieces by hand. And so you saw a lot of people with these trades and skills in the area, in addition to the carpenters who would build a ship.
Two of the largest ships ever to sail from the Gaspé Peninsula were built at Duthie's Point, scene of a flourishing shipyard during much of the 1800s.
There were some 60 different vessels built here, and some quite large ones. Actually, the three largest square riggers that were built anywhere on the Gaspé were built here, except for a full-size ship, quote ship, that was built up in the Cross Point area. So it was pretty prolific.
Orchestrating such a skilled crew demanded careful planning over the long term. Even relatively small vessels of 50 tons or so could take upwards of 2 years to make.
The frames of these ships were, you know, they were that wide and they were spaced that far apart. Like, you know, it was basically the hull outside of the ship was all frame almost, and covered with big plank. So they were quite sturdy. They had to be, and it was an awful lot of work by hand. This model is like a brigantine, and you see the square rig sails here on the front mast. Okay, so those were sails that they hauled up and down. Men would go up and actually physically stand on ropes just below it and furl the sail up and tie it into to this spar. And the same for these. This is fore and aft sails on the back end. Now the fore and aft sails allowed the ship to go closer to the wind, so they could maneuver better. Not, you know, they can't go directly upwind, but they could tack and advance that way better than the full square rigged sails. And most large ships here would have had 3 or 4, maybe even more masts, all with square rigged sails. And they go. You have to wait for the appropriate weather, and they go with the wind. In the old times, people knew the different names for all the different types of ships, and they just look at it and say, well, that's a brigantine, or that's a barkentine, or that's a, you know, a schooner, or whatever. But people have forgotten that terminology pretty much there now, because there's not too many of them around.
To keep up with orders for new vessels, many Gaspesian shipbuilders brought skilled laborers to the coast from Great Britain and the Channel Islands.
It wasn't just the shipbuilders and the carpenters and that, it was the seamen, the captains. And a lot of these families had people who were crew and captains and crew on these ships. And it took a lot of crew then to manhandle sails. And there's many stories of ships being built. There's the Mizpah out of Mull Bay, which was built locally, a big ship, and staffed with local crew. And she departed from Barishwa and was never heard from again. You know, there's the story of one of the Caldwell ships, Caldwell's ship in New Isle with the crew, and it never heard from again. And at several years later, the story got back that there was a ship out in the Atlantic, and it came across one of these Caldwell ships that had been dismasted, and it was still afloat, because these were wooden boats, and they floated even when they're full of water. And there was a crewman, one man on it, and he was desperate, almost, next to death. But the ship must have been caught in a storm and dismasted, and no other means of propulsion, and ended up there was just one fellow left on it, whatever happened. But it was a rough life.
It's estimated that at least 460 ocean-going vessels were built on the Gaspé coast from the late 18th to the early 20th century. Red pine and cedar were the most popular woods used, but local builders also used balsam fir and silver and yellow birch trees. Duthie's Point would become a leading Gaspé shipwork. Shipbuilding in the New Richmond area came to an end in 1870. More than a century has passed since the last ship made here set sail.
There's maybe 4 to 6 weddings here this summer, and the lighthouse will be part of the weddings.